Welcome to this edition of Futurartist Records Presents. My guest today is an audio engineer who stopped in to talk about some of the things to look for before you go to the recording studio. Futurartist Records Presents Bret Batterman. Thanks, Bret, for coming in today.
Thanks for the invitation.
You bet, you bet. We were having quite a little banter here before we started this.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us a brief background on kind of how long you've been involved with music and what your education has been?
So I've been in music for since the 4th grade. Started in choir and band, moved up through high school and into college. Worked in radio for quite a while through college at 2 different places, Clear Channel, at a Clear Channel cluster, as well as at my college radio station. Moved up and out, went to audio school, audio engineering school, and then moved to New York City, started working in recording studios, off-Broadway doing production sound, moved to Washington, D.C. and worked in audiovisual AV production sound as well, and then fled the East Coast and then started embracing Denver and working in bands, also doing AV, and now I work for a national science lab in Boulder doing their multimedia. So
wow, cool. You've been around.
Yeah, around.
That's cool.
It's been an exciting career
That's cool.
so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now you've worked, you just mentioned some of the unique demographics you've been in. What did you do in each of those? You're originally from California, correct?
Yes.
But then you went to New York, you went to D.C., now you're kind of halfway back to home almost. What did you do in each of those demographics specifically?
When I lived in California, I was the music director for a college radio station, which is a non-commercial educational station. So basically non-commercial formats, jazz and classical and folk and everything that you can't make commercial money out of. For the Clear Channel cluster, I was a promotions assistant, so going out and doing events, setting up the tent and the inflatables and running banners and stuff. But then worked my way up to production assistant, making commercials and little stingers for the air. And worked up to on-air, which was doing, a shift, full-time air shift overnights. So I was on the air I would usually show up at 10 p.m., voice track out my shift, which means record all my breaks. And then once that was done, I would start making commercials for the next day or for, whatever was on the list. That was in California, moved to Arizona, and that was audio school, but I was also a production assistant for a radio station there. So same thing, banners and that kind of stuff. Moving to New York City, I worked at Sear Sound, which is the oldest recording studio in New York, and in the city, and that has every client from all over the world. They have one of the best mic collections in the world, and so it was catering very much to high-end jazz, classical, anybody who needs the tippity top of the equipment, with the most expensive equipment. And then I was also a producer for a non-commercial educational station in New York City, part of the therapeutic recreation for Roosevelt Island. The hospital on Roosevelt Island has patients and residents that, as a part of therapeutic recreation, they have radio shows, and I was the producer for those radio shows. Then if we move over to Broadway, doing production sound, and that is, 7 or 8, I think it was 9 shows a week. So a show every night plus 2 Saturday and 2 Sunday. So I would be doing the production sound, which is running the mixing console, playing sound triggers and everything like that during the show. And that was fantastic, regular old entertainment for New York tourists and citizens alike. And then stuck there in New York City for a while, moved to an off-Broadway theater where I was doing production sound for everything from Broadway reviews to burlesque shows, aerial acts. Margaret Cho did The Sensuous Woman there, her burlesque show. And then and everything under the sun, anything that was kind of a smaller production, we could handle there. Once we moved to DC, commercial AV production is much different than anything that I had done previously, and yet still kind of the same. I'm still just running microphones and pushing sound out speakers. So I started working for PSAV, which is the largest audiovisual company, I think in the world now through acquisitions. Yeah, they do. They have stuff everywhere. And I was stationed at the Willard Intercontinental, which is on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's where Lincoln stayed after he won the second election. And they wrote Battle Hymn of the Republic there. So it's a historic landmark and stuff. And I got to work with everybody, you know, the cabinets, vice president, president, you know, first lady, lots and lots of dignitaries, foreign dignitaries. It was quite a treat. And then moved out after PSAV lost the contract at the Willard. I moved out to the Wardman Park, which is out by the zoo in Washington, D.C., and that has a 3,200-seat ballroom that I was the audio engineer one for.
Wow.
So we would be doing big events. I think Michelle Obama's Right Now Move, or Let's Move Now or something. She did a campaign event for us there.
Okay.
Transportation Research Board, which is a gigantic transportation trade show, took place there. Lots and lots of big events. But then, the final demographic, moving out to Colorado, where it smiles all the time. I was working for PSAV here and doing the similar hotel AV, but then got out of that. And then now that I'm working at NCAR in Boulder, it's mostly science folks doing presentations, PowerPoints, seminars, maybe like the summer Christmas party, or sorry, the summer barbecue party, or the Christmas party that was just last night. Do the event stuff for that.
Gotcha.
And that's really straightforward and simple compared to like many moving parts at large events. So, large event space.
So you've done all sorts of entertainment and business stuff both.
Oh yeah, thoroughly.
Wow.
Yeah, and they all need audio support.
Sure.
You know, so that's helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you work for NCAR, and you also run a studio here in the area. So actually here in town even. So who in the area have you worked with, and what kind of projects have you done?
So when I moved to Longmont, I made contact with Bonnie Sims from Bonnie and the Clydes, and I did live sound for Bonnie and the Clydes for a good solid year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, going around to different gigs, and that was such a treat, you know, and they're fantastic musicians, so it was wonderful to see them play even the same song over and over, because they do change it. And then as far as recording, I've worked on Flynn and Company's first record, Lost Love. I worked on Telia Americana's first EP project. We did that all in the house. And then we did the rock and roll project for Flynn and the Electric Company last fall. I've been working a lot with Soundpost Acoustics, who's an acoustician here in Longmont.
Oh, cool.
And been picking up classical gigs for him. So essentially just the gigs that he doesn't have the time for anymore.
Right.
I can go and do those for him, and that's been really exciting and new breath of fresh air.
Sure.
I just started on Eric Adrian Gonzalez's EP. I'm working on doing a mix down for Clandestine Amigos art walk show that they did over the summer. Cool. And basically anything that shows up.
Cool.
I don't try to press it a lot because I enjoy my free time too.
Sure.
And I enjoy going outside, going for a hike, or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like there's never a shortage of folks here, creative folks that have something in mind that they want to do and work through. And because I'm independent, I can offer them probably some of the better rate as far as and a little bit less pressure as far as somebody that has in a commercial situation who needs to pay the bills.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, and we need to get things done, whereas we can maybe work a little bit slower. And
it gives them a little bit more freedom to get what they're looking for and not go broke doing it.
And I try to make that one of the selling points too, is that's one of, if you want to go where it's pedal to the metal and the pressure's on, well, then you should go and work with Mark at Wind Over the Earth.
Right.
Because he'll give that to you in spades.
Right.
And for me, it's more like pajamas and coffee and let's take it easy. So
yeah, cool. That's very cool. Yeah. Well, now that we've got some background and know that you actually know what you're doing, which is pretty cool.
Well,
a lot of people make it up as they go.
Yeah.
You talked the other day with me about things that bands need to consider that a lot of times they don't. The pre-production stuff. What are some of the considerations before you even decide to record something?
I would say the main consideration is do we even want to do this? It's, and a lot of times you have to start from, is it just you? Is it you and a partner? Is it a band? Is it, how old is everyone? Are we 21 or 22, or are we 42 or 50? And all that kind of stuff plays into it. when I say whether you really want to do this, i.e. commitment, money, time away from your family, time away from other projects, you know, if your house is falling down, you might not want to start a recording project.
Right.
So I would say that's the most important thing to consider is just, do we even want to do this? Are we a gigging band and that's just what we like to do is play out and play gigs? Do we have any original songs? Those are the real things that should be all answered before you even consider calling anybody. Yeah, talk to your friends, see if they've done a recording, how much of a hassle was that? You know, does that sound like something you are looking forward into getting yourself into? And then the commitment of, like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it as much as I can because it is out there for the whole world to see, you know. And I always say too that if you have kids or if there's some mouthy kid that you want to have them shut up, then you make an awesome recording, and then anytime they give you lip, you can just throw it on the table and be like, well, take a bite out of that, Junior. Yeah, and that'll you know, you make your mark in your own way. And I think that's something to consider for recording because it can be a big mark, and it can be a gigantic feather in your cap and lead to the next thing too. So,
we talked about knowing what the recording process is. I know from my experience, I knew roughly what the experience was, but there are a lot of things you aren't ready for when you go in. So knowing the process is important. What can you do as a band who's going in for the first time to learn what those processes are so that you're prepared?
Well, I would do as much research as you possibly could. I mean, we're living in the best time ever to record music, mostly because the space has been laid flat as far as getting into. If you have $300, you can buy an interface and a microphone and do it all your own in your bedroom. You can take that $300 and give it to some kid who has some technology and record you. You can take a couple $1,000s and give it to somebody. But like most things, it usually depends on how you've lined things up beforehand. I would read and look at as many YouTube videos along those lines as possible, what to expect when you're going to record, lay out budgets, lay out times, when do we want to do this, and do it all in a very stoic, planned way. Don't get delusions of grandeur. While that is exciting, you know, that can come later. Yeah, I would say those are the important things. Make sure that everybody knows what the project is about. Similar, you know, and it's very strange, similar to a marriage. You know, you don't want to have it be about one person. You want to have an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. You want to try to build something together. And if you're into that, I mean, there's really nothing that can hold you back as far as knowledge and stuff. Yeah, I would say consult YouTube, producer friends. If you have anybody who's a fantastic musician and has those skills, I would reach out to them and start that pre-production process. If you can pay somebody, if you can work out a trade. If they're a new producer and they want to just do this to get their feet wet producing, you can work with them like that. There's a lot of ways that people are flexible in the creative realm.
You talk about reaching out to producers, studio musicians, things like that. How do you find, and I don't know that there's a specific answer for this, but how would you recommend people find the right studio, the right producer, the right engineer for their project? Because there's so many different approaches. Sometimes your engineer becomes your producer. Sometimes your engineer says, hey, look, this isn't the studio you need to work in, but I'd be more than happy to help you on a different level. So how do you kind of get a feel for what you need to look for and what's going to be a good fit for you?
Well, I would ask peers. If you're a metal band, you have to know at least a few other metal bands that have worked on something like that. And if they haven't, then find a few metal bands that you respect that have made, local bands that have made albums, and ask who they would recommend. Often in musician circles, there are a few people that are intuitively that will be a good fit for your project. I know that the Telia Americana project that they did at Wind Over the Earth, they hired Taylor Sims to help do pre-production and produce and arrange and things like that. I believe Mark helped a little bit with that too. finding that right person is so crucial because you want somebody who will push you and be the encouraging disciplinarian, but will also like perhaps tease out things of your material that you haven't thought of before. It is bringing someone with a larger, creative experience, a larger creative canon to bring to bear on your tunes that can take them to the next level. And that really is important if you want to make a recording that's going to stand the test of time.
Right.
A lot of people, you are just so enmeshed in the project that a lot of times it's very difficult to get that 1,000-foot view.
Right, right.
So finding those kinds of things, do you want a large studio? Do you have $10,000 to blow and go somewhere, for 2 weeks to record? I mean, there's recording spots that are specifically tailored to be vacation spots. You go to like Jamaica or somewhere, or you pinch your pennies and go to a local studio and work there, and then save the money to spend on something else.
Right.
There's lots.
So that pre-production really, it plays into every aspect.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the judge too. It is the judge for how you will stack up to your project. Like how will your project? Moreover, how will you assess your performance afterwards? Or is it going to be something like, oh, well, we just did this, willy-nilly, and it obviously shows in this project, or did we, give our all, and now this is something I want to like get framed and put on the wall. Which is a lot of people do with their first record.
Sure.
So,
oh, absolutely. Yeah. As an engineer, have you found that you sometimes take on the role of the producer as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, especially on smaller projects.
Yeah.
A lot of times musicians, if they're just starting out and they have songs that they've written, but they don't really know where to go with them, it's really helpful to let them know, like, oh, well, we could add extra instruments, extra parts, maybe move the arrangements around, all those kinds of things. And also the self-producing, if it's just somebody playing acoustic guitar and singing, and they're really good, often I have to tell them, like, you will have to self-produce because I won't be able to tell you when, like, all your takes sound great. So you tell me when you've hit the, like, shining star take, and then we'll use that.
Yeah.
And often trying to reach out to people and get them to, like you asked, do I fall into that role? Well, sure, if we're working to make the best project possible, but a lot of times it's working in conjunction with that other person. And if it's only 2 or 3 people, we're working together for something larger.
Sure.
We've taken that on ourselves and work for the group project.
Have you ever worked on a project where they wanted to be the producer and they just wanted you to engineer?
Oh, sure.
Or that you've worked in conjunction with a producer that's outside of the band?
Oh, absolutely.
What are the different kind of relationships? How does that usually work out in each of those situations?
Well, the producer, I would say, is they're in the captain's chair. They are running the session. They're minding the time. They're minding the money. They're minding food, breaks, tones. If somebody's getting tense, if somebody's not making a part, like when to move on to the next song, when to stick with it. All of those kinds of 10,000-foot decisions. It's really helpful to have one person to focus on that stuff specifically because everyone else has a lot of other things to do. The musician is focusing on their performance, on focusing on their health and making sure that they're ready to rock, their mental state. The engineer is focusing on all the technical things, gain structures and all those kinds of fun little items. And also anything the producer is saying, if the producer is saying, this vocal is sounding a little rolled off, like let's search for something brighter. Well, they're going to have a place to move to where they can get a brighter sound for that producer. And a lot of times the producer is just giving the orders. I did a vocal tracking session with Robbie Neville here not too long ago, and it was just him and me running Pro Tools and the vocalist in the booth, and we just take after take after take after take, and we're just doing what he says. Because and he's going to give us a big fat stack of money at the end of the day to do that. So it works out great.
Do you ever find at the end of the day that you're in a position like that where I'm just going to be doing what I'm told, and you're like, well, that was a rough day. I know I'm going to get paid for it, but because you can hear things or see things, and you're not allowed to input on it.
Right.
Or do you just go, well, that's my role, no big deal?
Yes, I would
Okay.
say it's more that. It's not my responsibility,
Yeah.
moreover. Like, I have my responsibility, and if something sounds weird or funky or bad, what I think is bad,
Right.
that's the producer's responsibility. That being said, if I'm in that role, if I'm assuming that role, I'm the only one in the control room, and like I said with Adrian Gonzalez, it's just me and him. So we kind of go back and forth and try to suss it out. We listen back a lot, and try to keep both of those hats on at the same time. Obviously, it's a lot easier when you're not having to deal with, Metallica or somebody out in the booth.
Yeah.
But, and that being said, that's why there are these wonderful producers that can do these things, keep things loose, keep things humorous, to keep the mood light, and then also crack the whip when that has to happen.
Right,
so.
right. Yeah, that can be a challenge, I'm sure. Now, you had mentioned producer's role and food and tension and all that stuff. As a band, do you think that's important to think about in the pre-production? The communication with the band, making sure they get breaks, making sure that they compromise when they're in the studio, making sure there aren't any distractions, somebody playing video games on their phone, but also making sure that they're having fun while they're doing it, that they're being absorbed into the project to give it the best that they can.
Yeah, I would say it's similar to going on like a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. You're going to want to get everything in. One of the phrases, you can sleep when you're dead.
Right.
It's very cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I would approach that similar, along the same lines as the recordings, because you never know if you're going to be back. And you never know if this project could be the one. And by the one, I just mean the one that you hold in your mind as like, this is the mark I left on planet Earth.
Right.
As whatever. You could have 10 kids, but you look back on the record.
It's interesting to talk about, when you're going in as a band, a lot of times bands don't think about
getting immersed. That's what we're talking about.
And oh man, I'm hungry. Well, nobody else has even thought about that yet.
Right.
So do we need to take a break and eat?
Right.
Do I consider that, or do I just go, let's push through it because we've only got an hour and a half left?
Sure. I would, like I said, make the most of it. Get family involved. If it's five guys in a band and they're making a rock record, it's like, well, maybe somebody should cater some pizzas, or maybe somebody should, get the families to make a picnic style, and get in the right mental space for it. There's lots of ways to do it. Take a walk together, go on a camping trip together. Try to get yourself as locked in as you possibly can into what you're doing in the moment. Making sure your instruments are all in order. Like you said, minimizing distractions. There should be a rule where there's no distractions at all, no cell phones allowed, no extra people around, groupies or whoever is just, soaking up oxygen. It's very, I would say the best stuff comes from focus. Focus in on it like a laser and concentrate. Try to be your best selves, be there for each other, be there for the bandmates, be giving, give from, it's for free, you can be there and be supportive to each other, and that works. It's surprising how much it works, because it's so difficult. We all suffer from crippling self-doubt, and a lot of times when you record, you think you sound terrible. Just because you haven't heard yourself back before. You haven't heard yourself played back before.
And it is very different.
Oh, it's shockingly different.
It's hearing yourself when you're doing it.
Stomach-turningly different.
It is.
Yeah, especially if you haven't experienced it before, it will be a revelation. It's like a slap with a wet fish.
It kind of is sometimes,
it really
isn't it?
is.
Yeah.
I would say even if it isn't, you could be Whitney Houston and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't
matter, because it's not. It's unnatural. It is unnatural to hear yourself back to yourself outside of your head.
Now, I've been in a couple situations where the studio had like a break room outside of the control room. Do you try to always keep the whole band in the session so they're all kind of a witness to what's going on? Or, talking about giving people breaks and allowing for refocus and things like that, having a situation where one member, hey, I'm not going to be on for an hour and a half for my part, I'm going to go out and get a cup of coffee or watch a TV program or whatever, so I can kind of reset. What kind of preference do you usually have? What do you find works best?
I usually try to leave it up to the band. The band or the producer or whatever, if it's a very tight-knit group, then they're going to want to all be there and all going to want to have opinions and things and feedback into the process. That being said, if you are, tone hunting with a drummer for a day or 2 days, if you're really like sinking in that deep, a lot of times people can get really bored with that stuff because it's very nitpicky and very, and a lot of times you're searching for something that only one person has in their head, most of the time the producer.
Right.
And so it is helpful to have something like a little lounge area where people can take a break. Being close to somewhere where they can grab a coffee or go get a lunch or just take a walk around the block, throw a football around in the parking lot or something. That all helps a lot.
That's why those big end studios have 10 acres around them.
And they'll have
all those options.
And they'll have a full-blown, video game room with PlayStation, Xbox, VR, like the whole 9 yards, ball pits, and all that kind of stuff. Just because it works, ping pong tables, and all that stuff does encourage camaraderie and teamwork as well.
Right. Yeah, it serves a lot of purposes.
Yeah, and really it's encouraging like the human side to come out, like the scared side that you're always afraid to let show.
Yeah.
Well, now it's time to let that flag fly.
Yep.
And if it means like, have an Entenmann's cake cut up into bite size so somebody can just come along and put 2 pieces of cake in their mouth and go back into the studio, because sometimes you're working on something and you've consumed all your calories and now you're having a fall off and you need to eat. You just need sugar to get back into your bloodstream so you feel like a human again. That's all really important to be aware of yourself, but like I said, the producer is usually on that kind of thing. If I'm in that role and I'm at the desk, I try to keep it on like break schedule, 2 hours, 4 hours, let's take a breather. Ear fatigue is something to pay attention to with engineers, as well as with the band, if they're out there shredding on Marshall stacks.
Especially if they're having trouble, I'm guessing, sometimes you can go in and do something in 1 take or 2 or 3 takes, and other times you're on take 10 and you're like, I don't even know what I'm playing anymore.
Exactly. And a lot of that has to do with prep. Have you played this solo and you know exactly what you're going to play every time? That's why Randy Rhoads can triple track his solos, is because he knows exactly what he's going to play.
It's all mapped out.
Yep, he already knows. And he's, amazing. So.
Well, that helps,
that
right?
Helps. Yeah.
So what is your favorite part of the studio process? Because you're a musician yourself, you've been an engineer, you've been a producer. So what is your favorite part of the whole thing?
Gosh, there's a lot of.
Does it depend on the situation?
Yeah, I would say so, but there's so much joy to be mined, from this place. I get to do the technical proficient part of it, the craftsman, that like I'm whittling this recording away from a solid block of marble. I would say the best part though is seeing the satisfaction of the artist come to fruition. When you can make something. A good example would be the Flynn and Company record. I talking with Sean, and like we've become really close now.
Cool.
He said they were just porch songs, songs he wrote on the porch, with his dog, and like, to get him through some relationship turmoil, and then he said, I didn't even think anybody wanted to play these songs with me. And then my buddy Brooks played with me on the porch, and then we get him recorded, and now he's got an album that sounds pretty great, and other musicians and his other peers in the community stood up and took notice, like, this is actually pretty good. And to see him have that, his family came out for the album release party from Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow, cool.
So it is like a real mark, his mom was crying, his grandma is on the cover of the album artwork,
Oh, nice.
So the whole thing can be as rich as you want it to be. And for him, it was like a graduation, like I feel like for him, it was his merit badge of like, oh, I'm a musician now. I can get gigs, I can play festivals, I can get a band. People want to hear my music, they want to play my tunes. And sometimes you just need that little kick in the pants to get yourself to where you really would be if you were, I guess, a megalomaniac that could just self-reassure.
Right, yeah.
But a lot of times as a creative person, you can't do that for yourself because it feels a little, I don't know, presumptuous, or you just don't feel like an ego, or no one likes my songs, or it's the crippling self-doubt that most artists just.
But having that,
most people suffer from.
Well, and artists especially, it seems like it's a big thing. So being able to listen to it and go,
Yeah. Well, and you're getting...
I did that. That's cool.
Yeah, and to deliver something that was close to the bone. You know,
Sure.
if there's songs about divorce or, his album's called Lost Love or anything like that, or taking a drive out to the West Coast to try to get over, a relationship, that's all stuff that resonates really well with people, well-worn paths. And, stick with it, and that's the thing too. All of his friends are saying, stick with it. But until you have that artifact in your hands that you made, it's very amorphous, you're looking down a foggy road and it's very difficult to see what is there.
It's cool to have something finalized.
Or if you want to go down the road, like, I did this, it was sure a lot of work, I really want to do that again. I keep wanting doing this because I got that boost, or I really love doing this, or something.
And sometimes it opens up a whole nother avenue. You're like, oh wow, now I've got this idea. And
well, and in Flynn's case, he went electric, and now he's got a rockin' band, one of the rockin'est bands in town.
Wow,
so
cool.
That's a real, and it's a real treat for him. It's kind of a disbelief every day for him.
Right.
To hear him say it, but they're doing great. They rock Wibby and Left Hand and Bootstrap and everything. They're rocking. So.
Cool, very cool. How can people learn about what you do? How can people find you?
So I have a website, just bretbatterman.com. That's the easiest way to find out what I do, and everything's going to be on there. There's some under construction pages at the moment, but it mixes, and my CV is up there, client list, gear list, all that kind of, minutia.
Cool.
So,
and how far out do you like to have people notify you?
As far
Since
out,
you work a full-time job,
at least 48 hours. But I would say as far out as you want. It's I like people. The sooner the better. Usually, folks start coming to me in August and saying hey, I heard that you record. I want to work up a project. And then we kind of do pre-production for a month or two. It depends on kind of how chomping at the bit they are.
Gotcha.
And then we try to set a first tracking date. So that we can get them into the studio. If they're novice in that aspect, then we can at least roll tape and see if they want to do this at all.
Right.
Or if they need to have personal lessons for a month. They need to go to a professional and take, singing lessons for a month. And then they come back and they'll be ready to sing. They'll be ready to rock. Yeah. But, we should get to that point. And then... like I said, if somebody calls me and they say we have a gig at such and such venue, we want to do a live recording, I could do that within a week.
Okay.
So,
really, there's a lot of things to think about. So just if somebody's interested, just get a hold of you and
get a hold of me. And I would say also it's easier to the triangle of fast, cheap, and good.
Yes.
It's it can have 2 out of 3.
Yes.
And if you have stacks of cash, I might be able to make something happen for you.
Right.
But I don't necessarily like to work that way all the time.
Yeah. Bret, thanks for coming down today. This is fun.
You bet.
And we've talked outside of this setting about a lot of other stuff, so hopefully we can have you back in and we can dial in on some of those details.
That'd be great.
That'd be fun. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Folks, thanks for watching this show. Hopefully you learned something from it. There's so much information, and Bret definitely knows what he's talking about. So check out his website. If you're looking to record, definitely get a hold of him. And make sure you make sure you share, make sure you comment. If you've got questions about anything that we talked about today, definitely let us know. I'm Michael Hartsock. Thanks for watching Futurartist Records Presents.